Hello and welcome to At Home with Ildy. I am your host Ildy Lee, and today we'll take a fascinating look at adoption and at one family's unique and moving journey from Russia with love. Hi! Come on in! 6,000 Russian children are adopted each year by American families. As far as we know, only one single child was black. This is a story of Andrei, whose prospects for survival were grim had he not been adopted by a loving American family. Sit down and make yourselves comfortable. I am Ildy Lee. Welcome to Exceptional Lives of Amazing People. My guests today are Dr. Charles Gannon and his son Andrei. But you weren't always father and son. Tell me about it. How this nuclear family came to be. How did this happen? Was it an adoption?
Yes, it was an adoption, and it started out with my daughter, who in high school in about 1990 was an exchange student in Kiev, the Ukraine. And following her finishing high school, she wanted to learn more Russian and went to Moscow to live with a family. During that time, a friend of ours asked about adopting Russian children, and she started looking into it. And she went to several orphanages and to the government, certain agencies, to see what it would take to adopt Russian children.
Here she is with President Yeltsin. Wow! Your daughter Alyson is absolutely amazing. I can't believe that a young lady like her placed over 600 Russian orphans into American families. Wow! No wonder the press calls her an adopting angel. And what happened next?
And during one of her trips to an orphanage, she found Andrei and kind of fell in love with little Andrei. He was a very tiny child. Subsequently, my wife went to Russia and also met Andrei, and then they took him out of the orphanage for a time to see how things would work out and how they would get along. And they thought this would work out quite well and called me. I didn't go over to Russia, but we all agreed to adopt Andrei.
Tell me a little bit more about your own family. Sometimes when you understand the roots of a family, you understand the actions. What was it like when you grew up? Did you have any experience with interracial relationships?
As I was growing up, we had really no interracial relationships. I grew up in a conservative Jewish home, a middle class family in Chicago, and it was in a neighborhood that was primarily Catholic and with a minority of Jews. There were no blacks in the area at all at that time.
What advice do you have for other people about adoption? And what wisdom can you share with us?
Well, adoption could be a very wonderful and rewarding experience.
Andrei, so here you were, a black little boy in an orphanage in Russia. Tell me, how did that happen? Explain that to me.
Apparently, my father was going to school there in Russia.
Who was from an African country?
Yes, he's from Africa.
Do you know which country?
A little country called Togo.
Togo.
I really don't know the whole story behind why he was there, but I know he was there for school.
Yes.
And how they
at the
met.
University of
Moscow.
Yeah,
yes.
Moscow. How they met, we're not sure.
Mm-hmm. Your mother was Russian, right? right?
Yes, my mother was Russian, and she was born in Moscow. They had a relationship, and we're not sure if she couldn't afford to have a child or if her parents would not allow her to have a child. I don't think my father knows that I exist.
Probably at this time there were no black people in Russia at all.
Right.
So it could
It
have
might have
been
been
that,
it was an acceptance thing.
right, could have been that they were afraid to be
Discriminated
against, persecuted. But today you have a wonderful family and a beautiful country. Charles, what makes your family strong?
I think it's mainly respect for the feelings and rights of others, and consideration of other people in general.
How did it feel to grow up in an orphanage? What was the orphanage like?
It was very different from other kids. Being the only black person, I did a lot of the manual labor. I cleaned, I set the tables, I washed dishes, I scrubbed the floors. I was very mistreated.
Oh, it was kind of a slavery because of the color of your skin.
Mm-hmm.
How did you feel as a child? Did you feel undeserving? Did you feel that you were less than the other children because you were different? How did you feel inside?
I felt separated.
Separated. Did it hurt?
Being that young, I don't think I realized it bothered me, or more or less I really just didn't understand why.
You accepted
when
it.
I accepted it. It wasn't even that I accepted it, it's just I really didn't understand. I didn't know that I was a different color.
But the children must have been cruel to you
Oh,
sometimes.
yes. Mm-hmm. And they got away with it too.
They did. And I would assume that orphanage in a communist country must be something very different from here. I am sure you don't have luxury like here, meaning luxury, warm water, showers.
The bathrooms just had toilets. It was all unisex. The sinks were, there were mirrors, and then there were sinks facing each other. And one side was for the boys and the other side was for the girls. But we all shared the same bathrooms. I don't recall showers, or maybe that's too far back for me to remember. There was one area, play area, for the kids. And then there was another area, sleeping area. And in the play area there was a wall that had a row of chairs. And at night you had to put your clothes there. And if it wasn't perfect, you were either hit or you lost your privilege. And it was just rows of beds. And when you were told to go to sleep, you had to go to sleep. But I was always the last one in bed because I was finishing up cleaning the dishes or scrubbing the toilets.
So your story is basically a Cinderella story.
Yes, that's the way I think of it, a Cinderella story.
This little black child in a Russian orphanage had no chance whatsoever. Did you ever think, Andre, what your life would have been like if you didn't meet Alyson, your mom, and your dad?
Truly and honestly, I wouldn't be alive.
Wow.
It's very rare to see a black Russian. It's not common, or at least back then. The rules of an orphanage are, you live in the orphanage, and once you turn the age 16, you're dumped out on the streets. They'll give you, a little bit of money, and then you're on your own. And me being black, I would not have known what to do. I would have either robbed someplace and got shot, or got into drugs, or something, but I truly and honestly would not be alive.
What are your hopes and dreams today?
My dreams are to someday see where we just all get along, where there's no racism, no discrimination, because I see it every day. Children don't know the difference between black, Chinese, Indian. In their world, it doesn't matter.
We're just people.
Right, we're just people. You know, just friends, somebody you can play with. And, you know, when you grow up, you realize kids are taught that you're different. And it'd be wonderful if it wouldn't be that way. If it just didn't matter. And there are people who just don't care what color you are, but you still
accept
do
you
get
for who you are.
right. They do,
And that's how it
it's
should
a wonderful
be.
feeling. Yes. Mm-hmm.
That's how it should be. What were your hopes and dreams back then when you were a child?
Being that young, I don't think I really knew what hopes and dreams were. I knew someday that I would get out.
You did?
Yes. When I first met my mom, who came to the orphanage to rescue me or to adopt me, somehow I knew that this was it. When I first met her and first set eyes on her, I just knew.
You had an instant connection.
That's right. I knew that was it. I was going to leave.
The process of adoption itself, was it difficult?
I don't believe it was very difficult. I was really not involved in the process other than filling out a few papers and signing my name to things, because my daughter took care of almost the whole thing as far as facilitating the adoption with the Russian government, the American government. So for us, for me, it wasn't very difficult.
What was the adoption process from your point of view? How did you feel about the adoption?
This always brings a smile to my face because it was the best moment. I was 6 and I remember I was napping. I could never sleep during the naps. And I got patted on the shoulder and I thought I was in trouble. And I got up and I remember going into a big closet and getting dressed. I was surprised because I was putting on all these nice clothes. I thought, God, you know, how odd is this? I was escorted into this big dining area. And I can still remember it today. It had a huge table. It would like probably sit about 20 people, maybe more. And it had a big bowl of candies in the middle. On the other side of where the table was this small lady. I just looked at her and I smiled. I had a great big smile on my face. And from that moment I knew that I wasn't going to live there anymore, because somehow I knew that I was going to be far away from this terrible place that I was in. And I remember we all sat down. I really didn't understand what she was saying. My main focus was on that candy. Because, you know, usually never got candy. And then I guess they talked and I went with them. And I spent the day with them. And I went to my first McDonald's in Russia and had a hamburger. I had never had a wonderful meal. It was just wonderful. And when I walked into this McDonald's, I thought, God, look, this is a new world. And I said to my new mom, I said, is this America? I just thought, God, this is a great place. I didn't really know anything about America, but I said, you know, is this America? And we went to these different markets, and I saw this big clove of radishes, and I really wanted those radishes, so my mom got them, and I carried them in my hand all day long. And she had also bought me some sunflower seeds that I put in my pocket, and I had a wonderful, wonderful day. I thought, God, it's great. And then I realized that apparently communism wasn't over then, and so my mom had to wait 6 months before they would release me. And I didn't understand that. All I remember is her telling me that she would come back and get me. And I was just so heartbroken because I thought, God, I thought I was going to get away from this. But, it was the longest 6 months I had ever waited. But the day came. I wasn't always the best child.
Tell me about it.
There wasn't really any discipline in the orphanage, so kids could really get away with a lot of stuff. It was It was very bad growing up with the kids. They would hit you, and I was always usually the one that got into trouble. If I got bitten and I would bite back, then I'd get hit by the counselors or, the nannies. My mom, I give her a lot of credit. She came all by herself to Russia, stayed there for 6 months, and then had this wonderful escapade going back. I had never been on an airplane before, and I was very scared. I really didn't know where I was going. Of course, my mom spoke English, and I spoke Russian.
Once you arrived at your new home, there must have been a difficult period of adjustment.
I was a problem child. It was difficult for my parents the first few years, I'd say. I just misbehaved. I was due to no discipline in the orphanage. I finally was sent to a group home for a while, thinking that would change me, but it didn't, because it made me I think it more or less, it was like abandonment issues, because it made me more angry and I wanted to go back home. So I thought if I misbehaved more, they would send me home, which wasn't the story. But then finally, when I did go back home, I changed. There's really no explanation. I think everybody hits a maturity stage. And from that day on, my progression has gotten better and better.
You are evidently a very positive young man.
I've learned to work real hard. If it's something that I really, really, truly, honestly want, I will work. Nothing will stop me.
He went and helped build houses for Habitat for Humanity in Alabama.
One summer I went and worked for the Jimmy Carter Work Project, and this I absolutely love doing. I went and helped build houses for underprivileged people who didn't have a lot of money. We started from scratch, and within 5 days, there was this beautiful house that we built.
That must have been very rewarding.
It was just a great accomplishment to see the tears in their eyes, to be so thankful that somebody cares about them. And I do know how they feel, what it's like not to have anything. It made me feel good to pick up a hammer, putting the nails into the walls or putting the foundation up. I helped put the roof up. It's a great feeling, helping somebody else out. It's just, I put all my heart into it, and I do the best that I can, and that's what I've just learned.
Tell me a little bit more about your other achievements.
6 or 7 years ago, I started to ice skate. Then I ice skated for about 4 years. Then in high school, at least the last 2 years of high school, I wrestled. And that taught me to be real tough. And I learned a lot from wrestling. During that time, during wrestling, I also learned how to horseback ride. One of my dad's patients, named Basie Tankersley, owns a farm about 15 miles from where we live.
Tell us, where do you live?
We live in Tucson, so every Saturday I would go out, ride her horses. And I did trail, reining, and I got so good that I started showing in competitions. And eventually I qualified for junior nationals.
You did. Congratulations. So Dad, you're very proud of your son.
Sure am. I used to go out and watch him ride Saturdays. It was a pleasure.
And you mentioned something about a medal.
Well, when he qualified for junior nationals, he was given a large silver belt buckle and several other ribbons he's won. But the belt buckle was pretty impressive.
I have many ribbons.
You're amazing.
I've come from nothing to what I have now, and I just understand what it's like not to have anything, what it's like to live in a dump, basically.
You're so caring and understanding for someone who's been through a lot.
And one of the reasons why I'm caring and understanding is because
If somebody cared and was understanding toward you.
You want to give something back?
right, that's what I feel, is I want to give something back to the community, because so many good things have happened for me that I'd like to, share.
What an inspiration you are. Well, thank you for sharing your story with us. And thank you for joining us on At Home with Ildy. We'll see you next time.